Hey, what is up, everybody? I'm here to give you guys the first ever Read Aloud series on this channel. Now I'm going to try to be as quiet as possible doing this because I got people sleeping right above me and I just screamed really loud, so that's probably going to fuck shit up. So I'm going to do this as quietly as I can. Um, I had said I was planning on doing this series on this channel. Um, Now, I'm not going to be reading the book that I said I was going to read in my channel update video just because I've been offered to read a different book. Um, I will do the other book review at some point. Um, it's just this book I want to actually do a read aloud series for, just because of the fact that this book's more of a classic than the other book, and it's more well known. I'll go over what the book is in a second. But if you want to know how I'm going to structure this series, um, I'm going to read maybe it's probably going to start with like two chapters a day, but depending on how it goes, I may be more. Um, but the reason why I want to do this is for a couple of reasons. Well, for a few reasons. One is I'm out of school now, and I don't want to. What's going to happen probably is I'm going to be in summer vacation mode, so I won't be able to be reading as much as I will. And when I go back to school, I'll be kind of out of the habit of reading, and my reading skills will go back to being crap pretty much. So I don't want that to happen. Um, so that's one reason. The second reason is it's a different type of concept um, for me to do on YouTube. Um, it's a it's something to keep the channel fresh, and I think it will be something different that no one else really does on YouTube all that much. And the third reason I want to do this is I want to tape myself reading books is because I want to see actually as I go along with this if I improve in my reading skills. Um, that's left to be said. So that's why I'm also doing this. Now the book that I'm instead have decided to do um, is um, I don't even know if you can see it, is Tom Sawyer. Um, Now obviously you can't see it, the words anyways, because of the way the camera is. It's set up where it's like they're looking into a mirror, which sucks. Um, but this is going to be the first read aloud series I'm going to do. How I'm going to structure this is, like I said, I'm going to read a couple of chapters a day, um, and I'm going to read the book cover to cover, word to word, word from word. Um, this could either go um, really well, or it could go really bad, depending on how I end up reading this. So hopefully it goes well. Because in this, there's now I don't know how many chapters there are because of the fact that it's Roman numerals, and I don't know my Roman numerals. I'm just gonna guess that there's 35 chapters. Um, but there's also a conclusion, so that probably makes it 36. And I'll do each chapter in each video. I will go through it as thoroughly as I can. The reason, though, I picked this book over the other book I was going to read is because Tom Sawyer is a classic. Every kid knows it, and I'm probably the only person in the world that hasn't read Tom Sawyer, so I would actually like to read Tom Sawyer. Now, I know the book's called the Adventures of Tom Sawyer or something, so I'll, that's probably what I'll call put in the title of this video. I know YouTube is very strict about how you put the title of the video. So some videos probably will say The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, then the name of the chapter, and then Read Aloud series, or just read aloud. Other videos probably will just say Tom Sawyer. It's gonna vary depending on how this works. But yeah, so in this video, though, however, I will not be reading the book just yet. Um, I've come to a conclusion that I don't want to just read this book. I also want to know about the author that wrote the book, because sometimes knowing about the author's backstory kind of helps you, at least from what I found when I was in school this semester, um, know kind of where this book comes from. So I am going in this video. It's going to be a biography on Mark Twain. I'm going to try to do this every book read aloud series I do. Now it's probably not going to be for every single one. Where it will be in the beginning. Sometimes it's going to be towards the end. Just because of the fact that sometimes it has about the author at the end. So it's going to vary about how I structure this. But I'm going to be doing it in the beginning because it doesn't have an about author at the end. But I actually like this book. I like the design of it. It's nice. It's a nice hardcover book. I kind of want to talk about. So let me give a little bit of a biography, though. This is going to probably be a long-ass video because there's a lot to talk about with this author because he's very well known. I am going to be giving you guys a biography on the author of this book, Mark Twain, who is a very well-known name. And writing, he's a pretty damn famous author. You know, everybody knows the name Mark Twain. So I'm not going to waste any more of your time, and I'm going to talk about Mark Twain. Let me give you a little bit of a biography about him. Now, some of this stuff I got off Wikipedia. Some of it I went and watched videos on him. And I'm going to leave all of that stuff in the description box down below so that way you guys can read along with me as I go. I just need to sign into my Google Docs thing. And it's decided not to work. Let me make sure I saved it under the right thing. I didn't save it under the right thing. So just give me a second. I put it under the wrong username. So I'm going to talk about Mark Twain. Now, I'm not going to go over everything that he did. But also I'm going to try to go over everything he did at the same time because pretty much everything he did is pretty much important. So I'm going to read. I took some notes myself, but it's also really late and I didn't really want to sit here and talk forever. I also just am going to read word for word off Wikipedia as well. A lot of this I just took word for word from Wikipedia, so that's why I put it. But I also put some of my favorite quotes that he had. Now, I didn't write from any of his books just because I haven't read them, but the documentary I watched had some of his quotes. Now, if I didn't write them word for word because I was just getting too tired. I wanted to get this video up, but the video in the description box has it, and I will put in the video some of my quotes that I liked are there or something. But let me talk about Mark Twain. So, a lot of people probably know this, but his real name wasn't Mark Twain. His real name was Samuel Langhorne Clemens. I think that's how you say that. The reason why he didn't use his real name is because sometimes authors like to use pen names. I read they do that because they don't really want people knowing the real name. They kind of wanted at the time the mystique to be, and there's a lot of authors do that. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Now, obviously, if I stuck at giving you guys this information, like I said, you can look it up for yourself, but also, it's my first time doing this, so as I probably do this stuff more, I'll get better at it. But he was, but he was born on November 30th, 1835 in Florida, Missouri. And he was the sixth of 7 children, because at the time they had, people just made kids all the time. Because that was just the way America was. And he was the son of Jane and John Marshall Clemens. Ironically enough, though, when I was looking through this on Wikipedia, now I'm not really going to go into anything about his parents, but it seems like the father is more well known than his mother. I thought that was kind of interesting. And he's Twain is of Cornish, English, and Scottish descendants. And like I said, he's Jane and John Clemens had 7 kids, including Mark Twain. The other kids, now I'm going to try to like hell to pronounce their names. The other kids were Orwan, Henry, Pamela, Margaret, Benjamin, and Pleasant. I think is how you say that. Um, Now, only 3 of these kids survived childhood. 3 of them did not. Margaret died. Margaret only lived from 1833 to 1839. Benjamin lived from 1832 to 1842. And Pleasant lived from 1828 to 1829. So Pleasant actually died when Mark Twain was only 6 months old or something like that. So that was actually kind of interesting. I don't really know. It didn't really say why. And like I said, I don't really want to focus on why because this is really about them. This is about Mark Twain. Um, but continuing, is at the age of 4, he moved to Hannibal, Missouri, um, which is interesting because this is where he lived his childhood. And Hannibal, Missouri, um, like every 4th of July in the documentary I watch, does like a does events celebrating Mark Twain, which I think is kind of cool. Um, but if you don't know what Hannibal, Missouri is, it's a port town on the Mississippi River that inspired the fictional town of St. Petersburg in the Adventures of Tom Sawyer and the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. So pretty much, if he didn't move here, maybe or maybe the Adventures of Tom Sawyer and stuff would, maybe those books would exist, but we wouldn't have that town in that book. In 1888, well, sorry, where else? But in 1848, he left school when he was only in 5th grade to become a renter's apprentice. Something I didn't mention, and I meant to put it in my notes here, is his father ended up passing away just before I think he had left school. I'm going to check real quick to see that part of it. Just give me a second. Yeah, his father died of pneumonia in 1847 when Mark Twain was 11, and then the next year he left school after the 5th grade. A lot of authors and stuff at the time really weren't very only educated themselves, which is kind of interesting. Continuing though, in 1851 he began working as a typewriter. Did a lot of interesting things there. When he was 18, he left Hannibal and worked as a printer in New York City, Philadelphia, St. Louis, and Cincinnati, joining the newly formed International Typographical Union, the Printers Trade Union. Twain describes his boyhood in life on the Mississippi, stating that there was but one permanent ambition among his comrades, to be a steamboat man. The reason why they would, a lot of people at the time wanted to be a steamboat man was because that's where a lot of people bought their money. It says a lot of people got paid a lot. It says on the Wikipedia page that, where does it say that? That it says it in here somewhere. It says you get paid a lot of money. It's a lot for back then, but it probably wouldn't be a lot now. But you get paid like $500 like an hour or something. Now obviously I don't think that's true, but it's something like, it's a lot of money though for the time. And so it was, that was a lot of thin. So after he graduated school, he used that money, that $500, and he was trained by Horace E. Bixby, and he taught him the river between New Orleans and St. Louis. And after this, Mark Twain started to study the Mississippi River, and then more than 2 years later, before he received his pilot's license. He would receive his pilot's license. He received his pilot's license. And actually, this is actually kind of ironic. piloting also gave his pen name for Mark Twain, and the reason what Mark Twain really meant was traditional terms for soundings are a source for common expressions in the English language, notably deep six, a sounding of six fathoms. Um, on the Mississippi River in the 1850s, the leadsmen also used old-fashioned words for some of the numbers. For example, instead of two, they would say Twain. Thus, when the depth was 2 fathoms, they would call by they would call by the Mark Twain. The American writer Mark Twain, a former river pilot, likely took his pen name from this cry. The term lives on in today's word and echoing sound. The technique of using sonar to measure depth. But think about it. If Mark Twain didn't go into piloting, we might not even have he might not even be known as that name. So that was, that was very interesting. But continuing, his brother Henry ended up doing some work with him piloting, and unfortunately, Henry was killed on June 21st, 1858, when the steamboat called the Pennsylvania exploded. What was ironic enough was Mark Twain actually had a dream that this was going to happen. It actually talks about it explains it very well in here. And this got him interested to study psychology, which is pretty much like stuff with telepathy and all that stuff. And he said that he's always been guilt stricken, and he just always himself responsible for his death for the rest of his life, which is kind of a shame. But I thought that was kind of interesting. But Henry was a river pilot until the Civil War, which started in 1861. Obviously, everybody knows what the Civil War was fought over. It was fought over slavery. It was the Confederates versus the Union. Mark Twain enlisted as a Confederate soldier. However, he disbanded in 2 weeks, which he talks about this process in one of his sketches. Sorry, my phone's being a little weird. The private history of a campaign that failed. Afterwards, he left for Nevada to work for his brother Orrin, who was the Secretary of the Nevada Territory. Twain describes the episode in his book Roughing It. So they traveled the world together. They pretty much went all over the world. But I'm not going to get into too much into that. But eventually he became a miner in Virginia City on the Comstock lode, but it failed. He wasn't finding much gold and stuff like that. So then eventually he worked at the Virginia City newspaper, Tutorial Enterprise, and this is when he actually started to first use his pen name Mark Twain. He first started using that on February 3rd, 1863, when he wrote a humorous travel account entitled Letter from Carson. Which I thought was pretty cool. I'm not going to say what else that says. And his experiences in the American West inspired Roughing It, which was written during 1870 through 1871, and it was published in 1872. Then his experience in Angel's Camp in Calaveras County, California, provided material for the celebrated Jumping Frog of Calaveras Country, which was published in 1865. And then in 1864, he ended up moving to San Francisco, where he possibly was one. And he ended up meeting like a lot of famous writers and stuff down there. And one thing that it says here, that there was a possibility that he was romantically involved with the poet Enya Coolbrith, but it doesn't necessarily say if he actually was or not. It just says it was possible. And his first success as a writer came when his humorous tale, The Celebrated Jumping Frog, of Cowboys County was published on November 18th, 1865 in the New York City Weekly, the Saturday Press. Um, and he would end up becoming pretty well known. He traveled the world for a little bit, promoted this article and stuff. So I thought that was pretty interesting. In 1867, a local newspaper funded his trip to the Mediterranean aboard the Quaker Sea, including a tour of Europe and the Middle East. He wrote a collection of travel letters, which were later compiled as The Innocents Abroad, which was published in 1869. As on this trip, which is why this is important, he met his fellow passenger Charles Langdon, who showed him a picture of his sister, Olivia. Twain later claimed to have fallen in love at first sight, which pretty much means when you first see someone, you fall in love. And this is pretty much when he met the love of his life. So I want to continue. And then when he returned to the United States, he was offered honorary membership in the Yale University's secret society Squirrel and Key in 1868, which was very interesting. And then in February of 1870, Twain married Olivia Landon in Elmore, New York. Ironically enough, Mark Twain said that he tried to propose to her 4 times, but she rejected, but then eventually she said yes, which I thought was pretty interesting. They ended up living in Buffalo, New York from 1869 to 1871, and overall they had 4 kids. They had 3 daughters and 1 son. The daughters' names were Susie, Clara, and Jean, and then they had 1 son, Landon. But Landon ended up dying at the age of 19 months due to diphtheria. I don't know what that is. Probably should have looked that up. That's on me. But Susie ended up living from 1872 to 1896. Clara ended up living from 1874 to 1962. And Jean ended up living from 1880 to 1909. Then Twain moved his family to Harvard, Connecticut, where he arranged the building of a home started in 1873. In the 1870s and 1880s, the family summered at Quarry Farm in Elmore, the home of Olivia's sister, Susan Crane. In 1874, Susan had a study built apart from the main house so that Twain would have a quiet place in which to write, which this is very important because this is how a lot of his famous works now were written. Well, write-ins, I don't really know, works, write-ins, whatever you want to call it. So Twain wrote many of his classic novels during his 17 years in Harvard, from 1874 to 1891, and over 20 summers at Quarry Farm. They include The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, which was published in 1867, which is right here. The Prince and the Pauper, I think that's, I don't know how to say that, which was published in 1881. Life on the Mississippi, which was published in 1883. Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, which was published in 1885. And A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, which was published in 1889. And unfortunately, in 1904, his wife Olivia died of heart failure. I read online that they did everything they could to try to save her. They tried to get her to start traveling across Europe, but then eventually there was just nothing they could do. Obviously, people died very young at that time, but she was, I mean, in 1904, so she, I guess it wasn't that young, I guess. But Twain patented 3 inventions, including, so he invented 3 things, including an improvement in adjustable and detachable straps for garments to replace suspenders, and a history trivia game his most successful was a self-paced scrapbook, a dried adhesive on the pages needed only to be um, moistened before use, and this sold over 25,000 um, copies or whatever. And then Twain lived his later years at 14 West 10th Street in Manhattan. Um, and Twain passed through a period of deep depression, which began in 1896 when his daughter Susie died of meningitis. Um, Olivia's death in 1904, and Jean's on December 24th, 1909. And actually, in one of the videos, when Clara and Olivia passed away, he actually, since Jean was the last one he actually considered Jean his favorite daughter. And when she passed away, that's kind of like when he finally had broken. It was kind of sad, actually, to see that. And now I'm going to go on his Wikipedia page because there's some stuff on here that I want to read. But yeah, also one of his friends ended up passing away as well, which kind of sucked. But what else did he do? I have it. But other stuff that Mark Twain ended up doing. So I already read the stuff about. So yeah, he ended up going through some financial troubles. It says that Twain made a substantial amount of money through his writing, but he lost a great deal through investments. He invested mostly in new inventions and technology, particularly in the page typesetting machine. It was a beautifully engineered mechanical marvel that amazed viewers when it worked, but it was prone to breakdowns. So Twain spent $300,000, which equals $8 million in infiltration adjusted terms, on it between 1880 and 1894. But before it could be perfected, it was rendered obsolete by the lineotype. He lost the bulk of his book profits as well as a substantial portion of his wife's inheritance. He also lost money through his publishing house of Charles L. Webster and Company, which enjoyed initial success selling the memoirs of Ulysses S. Grant, but failed soon afterwards, losing money on a biography of Pope Leo. Sorry, I don't know my Roman numerals. But I guess Pope Leo, I'm just going to guess like the 13th or something. Because it doesn't really say. Fewer than, and it sold it says fewer than 200 copies were sold. And then it says Twain and his family closed down the expensive Hartford home in response to the dwindling income and moved to Europe in June of 1891. William N. Laffin of the New York Sun and the Mercure newspaper syndicate offered him the publication of a series of 6 European letters. Twain, Olivia, and their daughter Susie were all faced with health problems, and they believed that it would be of benefit to visit Europe baths. The family stayed mainly in France, Germany, and Italy until May 1895, with longer spells at Berlin from the winter of 1891 to 1892. Florence, which they stayed for from the fall and winter of 1892 to 1893, and Paris, which they stayed for the winters and spring of 1893 to 1894 and 1894 to 1895. During that period, Twain returned 4 times to New York due to his enduring business troubles. He took a cheap room in September 1893 at $1 at $1.50 per day at the Players Club, which he had to keep until 1894. Meanwhile, he became the belle of New York, in the words of biographer Albert Bigelow Paine. Twain's writings and lectures enabled him to recover financially, combined with the help of a new friend in fall 1893, he began a friendship with financier Henry Hutchinson Rogers, a principal of Standard Oil, that lasted the remainder of his life. Rogers first made him file for bankruptcy in April 1894. Then he had him transfer the copyrights of his written works to his wife to prevent creators from gaining possession of them. Finally, Rogers took absolute charge of Twain's money until all his creators were paid. No, creditors were paid. Sorry, it's creditors, not creators. Sorry. Twain accepted an offer from Robert Spurlow Smith and embarked on a year-long around-the-world lecture tour in July 1895 to pay off his creditors in full, although he was no longer under any legal obligation to do so. It was a long, arduous journey, and he was sick much of the time, mostly from a cold and a carbuncle. The first part of the itinerary took him across the northern America to British Columbia, Canada, until the second half of August. For the second part, he sailed across the Pacific Ocean. His scheduled lecture in Honolulu, Hawaii, had to be canceled due to a chlorella epidemic. Twain went to Fuji, Australia, New Zealand, Sri Lanka, India, Mauritius, and South Africa. His 3 months in India became the centerpiece of his 712-page book, Following the Equator. In the second half of July 1896, he sailed back to England, completing his circumnavigation of the world begun 14 months ago. Twain and his family spent 4 more years in Europe, mainly in England and Australia, from October 1897 to May 1899, with longer spells in London and Vienna. Clara had wished to study the piano under Theodore Lischke, I don't know how to say his name, in Vienna. Unfortunately, Jean's health did not benefit from consulting with specialists in Vienna, the city of doctors. The family moved to London in spring 1899, following a lead by Houghton Bigelow, who had a good experience being treated by Dr. Jonas Henrik Kellgren, a Swedish, I'm not going to really say who he is because it doesn't matter. They were persuaded to spend the summer at Kellgren's sanatorium by the lake in the Swedish village of Siena. Coming back in fall, they continued the treatment in London until Twain was convinced by lengthy inquiries in America that similar osteopathic expertise was available there. In mid-1900s, he was the guest of newspaper Portary High Gilson read at Dollis Hill House, located on the north side of London. Twain wrote that he had never seen any place that was so satisfactory situated, when its noble trees and stretch of country and everything that went to make life delightful, and all within a biscuit's throw of the metropolis of the world. He then returned to America in October 1990, having earned enough to pay off his debts. In winter 1990 to 1901, he became his country's most prominent opponent of imperialism, raising the issues in his speeches, interviews, and writings. In January 1901, he began serving as a vice president of the Anti-Imperialist League of New York. Speaking engagements he does some speaking engagements, and that's not really important. He visited Canada. He was honored a banquet in Montreal, Canada, where he made reference to securing a copyright. But other than that, he did some stuff in Canada. I already talked about his death and stuff like that. Um, what did I want to talk about though? Something ironic though was Twain was born 2 weeks after Halley's Comet closest approaching in 1835. He said in 1909, "I came in with Halley's Comet in 1835. It is coming again next year, and I expect to go with it. It will be the greatest disappointment of my life if I don't go with Halley's Comet. The Almighty," he said, "no doubt. Now where now here are these two uncountable freaks. They came in together, they must go together." Twain's prediction was accurate. He died of a heart attack on April 21st, 1910, in Wheaton, Connecticut, one day after the comet's close approach to Earth. And then his headstone is in Woodlawn Cemetery. Upon hearing of Twain's death, President William Howard Taft said, "Mark Twain gave pleasure, real intellectual enjoyment to millions, and his works will continue to give such pleasure to millions yet to come. His humor was American, but he was nearly as much appreciated by Englishmen and people of other countries as by his own countrymen. He has made an enduring part of American literature." Twain's funeral was at the Old Brick Presbytery Church in New York. He is buried in his wife's family plot at Woodbury Cemetery in Elmira, Murray, New York. The Landon family plot is marked by a 12-foot monument placed there by his surviving daughter, Clara. There was also a smaller headstone. He expressed a preference for cremation, for example, in Life of Mississippi, but he acknowledged that his surviving family would have the last word. Officials in Connecticut and New York estimated the value of Twain's estate at $471,000, which today would be $12 million. And then talking about his writings, Twain began his career writing light, humorous verse, but he became a chronicler of the vanities, hypocrisies, and murderous acts of mankind. At mid-career, he combined rich humor, study narrative, and social criticism in Huckleberry Finn. He was a master of rendering colloquial speech and helped to create and popularize a distinctive American literature built on American themes and language. Many of his works have been suppressed at times for various reasons. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn has been repeatedly restricted in American high schools, not least for its frequent use of the word nigger, which was in common usage in the pre-Civil War period in which the novel was set. So I kind of don't really get why it's banned if that's how people talked at the time. It's kind of going to help people to know that. A complete bibliography, I think that's how you say that, of Twain's works is nearly impossible to compile because of the vast number of pieces he wrote, often in obscure newspapers, and his use of several different pen names. Additionally, a large portion of his speeches and lectures have been lost or were not recorded. Thus, the compilation of Twain's works is an ongoing process. Researchers rediscovered published material as recently as 1995 and 2015. I'm not really going to go into his early journalism. We know what happened. I'm not going to talk that much. I'll talk a little bit about this book. Um, but for this book, Twain's next major publication was The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, which draws on his youth in Hannibal. Tom Sawyer was modeled on Twain as a child, um, with traces of schoolmates John Briggs and Bill Bowen. The book also introduces Huckleberry Finn in a supporting role based on Twain's boyhood friend Tom Blankenship. Um, yeah, and then I'll talk. I'm not going to talk about his other books. I'll talk about Huckleberry Finn here. Twain's next major publication work was The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, which confirmed him as a noteworthy American writer. Some have called it the first great American novel, and the book has become required reading in many schools throughout the United States. Huckleberry Finn was an offshoot from Tom Sawyer and had a more serious tone than its predecessor. 400 manuscript pages were written in mid-1876, right after the publication of Tom Sawyer. The last fifth of Huckleberry Finn is subject to much controversy. Some say that Twain experienced a failure of nerve. As critic Leo Marx put it, Ernest Hemingway once said of Huckleberry Finn, "If you read it, you must stop where the nigger Jim is stolen from the boys. That is the real end. The rest is just cheating." Hemingway also wrote in the same essay, "All modern American literature comes from one book by Mark Twain called Huckleberry Finn." Um, Near the completion of Huckleberry Finn, Twain wrote Life on the Mississippi. Not really going to talk about that. Not going to talk about like some of his later writings. Twain produced President Ulysses S. Grant's memoir through his fledgling publishing house, Charles L. Webster and Company, which he co-owned with Charles L. Webster, his nephew by marriage. At this time, he also wrote The Private History of a Campaign That Failed for the Century magazine. This piece detailed his 2-week stint in a Confederate militia during the Civil War. He next focused on a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court, written with the same historical fiction style as The Prince and the Pauper. I don't know if that's how you say that or not. A Connecticut Yankee showed the absurdities of political and social norms by setting them in the court of King Arthur. The book was started in December 1885, then shelved a few months later until the summer of 1887, and eventually finished in the spring of 1889. It talks about his writings. It kind of goes on forever about it. What else? I'm not going to go over his views, really. I mean, if you want to, you can just look at that up for yourself. I just don't think that's as important. But I'll go over his bibliography. Well, I'll go over what his other pen names were, and then that's it. Where is it? Okay. So Twain used different pen names before decided on Mark Twain. He signed humorous and imaginative sketches as Josh until 1863. Additionally, he used the pen name Thomas Jefferson Snodgrass for a series of humorous letters. He maintained that his primary pen name came from his years working on Mississippi riverboats, where 2 fathoms a depth, indicating water safe for the passage of boat, was a measure on the sounding line. Twain is a Chadic term for 2, as in the veil of the temple was rent in twain. The river boatsman cry was Mark Twain, or more fully by the Mark Twain, meaning according to the mark on the line, the depth is 2 fathoms. That is, the water is 12 feet, which is 3.7 meters deep, and is safe to pass. Twain claimed that his famous pen name was not entirely his invention, and Life in the Mississippi He wrote, Captain Isaiah Sellers was not of literary turn or capacity, but he used to jot down brief paragraphs of plain practical information about the river and sign them Mark Twain and give them to the New Orleans Pickaninny, I think that's how you say that. They related to the stage and condition of the river and were accurate and valuable. At the time that the Telegraph brought the news of his death, I was on the Pacific coast. I was a fresh new journalist and needed a nom de guerre. I don't know how to say that. So I confiscated the ancient Mauner's discarded one and have done my best to make it remain what it is in his hands, a sign and symbol, and warrant that whatever is found in its company may be gambled on it as being the petrified truth. How I have succeeded, it would not be the modest. Twain's story about his pen name has been questioned by some, with the suggestion that Mark Twain refers to a run-in bar tab that Twain would regularly incur while drinking at John Piper's saloon in Virginia City, Nevada. Samuel Clemens himself responds to this suggestion by saying Mark Twain was the nom de plume of one Captain Isaiah Sellers, who used to write river news over it for the New Orleans PQ. He died in 1869, and as he could no longer need that signature, I laid violent hands upon it without asking permission of the perpetrator's remains. That is the history of the nom de plume I bear. In his autobiography, Twain writes further of Captain Sellers' use of Mark Twain. It's a long one. This is the last thing I'm going to be reading before I get to, and then I'll talk about his legacy. I was a club pilot on the Mississippi River then, and one day I wrote a rude and crude satire which was leveled at Captain Isaiah Sellers, the oldest steamboat pilot on the Mississippi River and the most respected, esteemed, and revered. For many years he had occasionally written brief paragraphs concerning the river and the changes which it had undergone under his observation during 50 years, and had signed these paragraphs Mark Twain and published them in the St. Louis and New Orleans journals. In my satire I made rude game of his reminiscences. It was a shabby, poor performance, but I didn't know it, and the pilots didn't know it. The pilots thought it was brilliant. They were jealous of Sellers because when the gray heads among them pleased their vanity by detailing in the hearing of the younger craftsmen marvels which they had seen in the lawn ago on the river. Sellers was always likely to step in at the psychological moment and snuff them out with um, wonders of his own which made their small marvels look pale and sick. However, I have told all about this in old times on the Mississippi. The pilots handed my extravagant satire to a river reporter, and it was published in the New Orleans True Delta. That poor old Captain Sellers was deeply wounded. He had never been held up to ridicule before. He was sensitive, and he never got over the hurt which I had wantonly and stupidly inflicted upon his dignity. I was proud of my performance for a while and considered it quite wonderful. Um, but I have changed my opinion of it long ago. Sellers never published another paragraph nor ever used his nom de guerre again. Um, and then his legacy and depictions. Um, so this it shows some photos of it. Um, but here's what Mark Twain's legacy is. The trademark white suit. While Twain is often depicted wearing a white suit, modern representation suggesting that he wore them throughout his life are unfounded. Evidence suggests that Twain began wearing white suits on the lecture circuit after the death of his wife Olivia, which he called Livy for short, in 1904. However, there was also evidence showing him wearing a white suit before 1904. In 1882, he sent a photograph of himself in a white suit to 18-year-old Edward W. Book. I think is how you say that. Later publisher of the Ladies' Home Journal, with a handwritten dated note on verso. It did eventually become his trademark, as illustrated in anecdotes about this eccentricity. I don't know how to say that. I think that's how you say it. Such as the time he wore a white summer suit to a congressional hearing during the winter. McMaster's The Mark Twain Encyclopedia states that Twain did not wear a white suit in his last 3 years except at one banquet speech. In his autobiography, Twain writes of his early experiments with wearing white out of season. And this is kind of long, but I'll read it. Next, after fine colors, I like plain white. One of my sorrows when the summer ends is that I must put off my cheery and comfortable white clothes and enter for the winter into the depressing captivity of the shapeless and degrading black ones. It is mid-October now, and the weather is growing cold up here in the New Hampshire hills, but it will not succeed in freezing me, in freezing me out of these white garments. For here the neighbors are few, and it is only of crowds that I am afraid. I made a brave experiment the other night to see how it would feel to shock a crowd with these unseasonable clothes, and also to see how long it might take the crowd to reconcile itself to them and stop looking astonished and outraged. On a stormy evening, I made a talk before a full house in the village, clothed like a ghost, and looking as conspicuous, all solitary and alone that on that platform as any ghost could have looked. And I found to my gratification that it took the house less than 10 minutes to forget about the ghost and give its attention to the tidings I had brought. I am nearly 71, and I recognize that my age has given me a good many privileges, valuable privileges which are not granted to younger persons. Little by little, I hope to get together courage enough to wear white clothes all through the winter in New York. It will be a great satisfaction to me to show off in this way, and perhaps the largest of all the satisfactions will be the knowledge that every scoffer of my sex will secretly envy me and wish he dared to follow my lead. And then going through his bibliography. Now, obviously, like they said, it's not anything set in stone. Because they say that this isn't like the full thing because they've had to come back to it, they've added to it. So this is it as of right now. Um, at least we think so, anyways. So in 1873, he wrote The Gilded Age, A Tale of Today. These are his novels that he's written. So in 1873, he wrote The Gilded Age, A Tale of Today. In 1881, he wrote The Prince and the Pauper. In 1889, he wrote A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. In 1892, he wrote The American Climate, I think that says. In 1894, he wrote Pudd'nhead Wilson. In 1896, he wrote Personal Recollections of Joan of Arc. In 1916, he wrote The Mysterious Stranger, which was posthumous stage. In 1876, he wrote The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, which is what I'm going to be reading in this series. In 1884, he wrote The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. In 1894, he wrote Tom Sawyer Abroad. In 1896, he wrote Tom Sawyer Detective. In 1898, he wrote Schoolhouse and the Mysterious Stranger, which is 6 chapters, but it's an unfinished book. In 1884, he wrote Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer Among the Indians, which is only 9 chapters, so it's another book that's unfinished. In 1903, he wrote Huck Finn, which is also unfinished. Actually, this isn't. This one doesn't have a year, but he wrote Tom Sawyer's Conspiracy, which is 10 chapters, which is unfinished. And this one also doesn't have a year. He wrote Tom Sawyer's Game Plans, A Naval Battle, which is also unfinished. And then continuing for the Adam and Eve stuff, he wrote in 1904, he wrote Extracts from Adam's Diary. In 1905, he wrote Eve's Diary. Some short stories he's written. There's a lot of them here. In 1865, he wrote Advice to Little Girls. In 1867, he wrote The Celebrated Jumping Frog of Calaveras County. In 1868, he wrote General Washington's Negro Body Servant. In the same year, he wrote My Late Senatorial Secretaryship. In 1870, he wrote A Ghost Story. In 1874, he wrote A True Story, repeated word for word as I heard it. In 1875, he wrote Some Learned Fables for Good Old Boys and Girls. In 1876, he wrote A Literary Nightmare. In in the same year, he wrote A Murder, a Mystery, and a Marriage. In 1877, he wrote The Invalid Story. In 1879, he wrote The Great Revolution in Pitcairn. In 1880, he wrote 1601's Conversation as it was by the social fireside in the time of the toters. In 1882, he wrote The Stolen White Elephant. In 1891, he wrote Luck. In 1892, he wrote Those Extraordinary Twins. In 1893, he wrote The 1 Million Pound Note. I think that's what that says. In 1900, he wrote The Man That Corrupted Haleyburg. In 1902, he wrote A Double-Barreled Detective Story. In 1904, he wrote A Dog's Tale. In 1905, he wrote The Ward Prayer. In 1907, he wrote A Horse's Tale. In 1909, he wrote Captain Stormfield's Visit to Heaven. In 1912, he wrote My Platonic Sweetheart, which is during his posthumous stage. The rest of the last 3 are during his posthumous writings. In 1931, he wrote The Private Life of Adam and Eve. And in 2017, well, he didn't write this. This was when this stuff was published, I should say. But in 2017, the Pro-Learning of Prince Oli Malgren was published. And then for collections, the short story collections, The Celebrated Jumping Frog of Calaveras County, and other sketches were published in 1869. In 1871, Mark Twain's Burskew Autobiography of First Romance was published. In 1875, Sketches New and Old were published. In 1877, A True Story and the Recent Carnival of Crime was published. In 1878, Punch Brothers, Punch, and Other Sketches were published. In 1888, Mark Twain's Library of Humor was published. And in 1890, well, it was published, I should say. I messed up my words. In 1892, Mary Tales was published. In 1893, the £1 million banknote and other news stories were published. In 1906, the $13,000 bequest and other stories were published. In 1919, this was the rest of this is posthumous. But the Curious Republic of Gondor and other whimsical sketches were published. In 1938, the Washoe Giant in San Francisco was published. And then for essay collections, from 1870 to 1871, Memoranda, which was an essay collection from Galaxy, was published. In 1897, How to Tell a Story and other essays was published. And now all the rest of this is posthumous stuff. In 1923, Europe and Elsewhere was published, and it was edited by Albert Bigelow Paine. In 1962, Letters from the Earth was published. In 1972, A Pen Warmed Up in Hell was published. And in 1996, which was the year I was born, the Bible According to Mark Twain was published. And now going on to his essays, in 1880, On the Decay of the Art of Lying was published. In 1880, The Awful German Language was published. In 1882, Advice to Youth was published. In 1895, Fenimore Cooper's Literary Offenses was published. In 1887, English as She is Taught was published. In 1898, Concerning the Jews was published. In 1900, A Salutation Speech from the 19th Century to the 20th was published. In 1901, To the Person Sitting in Darkness was published. In the same year, To My Missionary Critics was published. In the same year, Edmund Burke on Croker and Tammany was published. In 1906, What is Man is published. In 1907, Christian Science was published. In 1910, Queen Victoria's Jewelry was published, and this was posthumous stage. But in 1923, the United States of Lynch Erdrum was published. And then for his nonfiction stuff, in 1869, The Innocents Abroad was published. In 1872, Roughing It was published. In 1876, Old Times on the Mississippi was published. In 1880, A Tramp Abroad was published. In 1883, Life on the Mississippi was published. In 1897, Following the Equator, which is sometimes titled as More Tramps Abroad, was published. In 1909, Is Shakespeare Dead was published. And then this is his posthumous stage. In 1920, Moments with Mark Twain was published. And in 1935, Mark Twain's Notebook was published. And then it says, published as a book in 1947, Letters from Hawaii was published, and there was letters that were written in 1886. And then other writings that he's written, he wrote a play in 1898 called Is He Dead? He wrote a strategical lyric in 1901 called The Battle Hymn of the Republic, which has been updated since, which is the updated version. He wrote a satire in 1905 called King Leopold's Solio Cry. I don't know how to say that. In 1908, he wrote the poem "Little Bessie Would Assist Providence." And this is his posthumous stage. In 1935, he wrote a children's book called "Sovereignly Peter," and then in 1879, he wrote a speech given to the Stomach Club called "Some Thoughts of the Science of Onanism," and then autobiographies and letters that he's written is Mark Twain's autobiography. Some of his autobiography. In 1906 through 1907, chapters from my biography was published by North American Review. In 1924, posthumous edition compiled and edited by Albert Bigelow Paine. In 1940, posthumous edition named Mark Twain in Eruption, compiled and edited by Bernard DeVoto. Posthumous edition compiled and edited by Charles Nieder. And then in 2010, posthumous edition compiled and edited by Harriet Eleanor Smith and the Mark Twain Project Volume 1. And then this is also a posthumous stage from in 2010, Mark Twain's letters from 1853 to 1888. And then this is going to be for release in 2017. Tutorial Enterprise letters. Yeah, that's all of his writings. And that's everything I could have given you that you need to know about Mark Twain. I was going to say some of my favorite quotes, but quite frankly, I'm just sick and tired of talking, so I don't really feel like saying them. But so far from watching and listening to Mark Twain and reading the way he speaks, he seems very educated, and the way he speaks is very interesting. I think he's interestingly educated. It definitely feels like he has a lot going on up here. He's not crazy, I don't think, but I just think he's the way he thinks about things is pretty cool. But I'm going to find that out once I read this book. I was going to do it right after this video, but I didn't. It's now 2:44 in the morning. I did not think I was going to be up this late doing this, but what happened is I had to do all this research. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get up tomorrow, and first thing, after I take a shower and eat breakfast and stuff, is I am going to sit down and I'm going to start reading chapter 1, probably through 4, when I wake up, of this book. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Sorry if this was just me talking for like an hour, and if you didn't care, I kind of can't really blame you because it was just me reading off a screen. But as I probably do these like biography sessions, I'm hoping I can get better. I actually feel like I kind of learned something about Mark Twain, which makes this more fun. But yeah, sorry if this was just me sitting down and pretty much blabbering for over an hour, so I apologize for that. But yeah, I'm going to end this video off because I want to get to bed. But that's pretty much it, guys. Please make sure to subscribe to my CM Brothers channel because I post content on there as well. Make sure to subscribe and, click on, follow all the links down in the description box down below. Make sure to check out the stuff I'm going to be posting about Mark Twain down in the description box down below. And please make sure to subscribe to this channel so that way you can watch me do the Read Aloud series for the Adventures of Tom Sawyer, because I'm going to officially start it in the next video. And also make sure to subscribe to this channel for other content as well. And that's pretty much it, guys. Talk to you later.